folks, it's that time once more. We're back with more of the story of Vakrias, and I think you'll be quite well pleased with the help you're getting tonight. I hope that at least for now this will satisfy that itch you have and momentarily quench that thirst for knowledge for more. So let's get right back into it, shall we? This is once more the history of Draco Vakrias follow-up. Now, the Draco family never understood the reasoning for the Reaper marking Vakrias. The black sand hourglass, which was said to be forbidden to be used by any but the Reaper itself, had a very unique shape. For anyone who watched the last video, that was the hourglass in the thumbnail, and we'll be working on a more detailed version soon so that it can be more accurately displayed. While it was recognized by anyone who had lived through a near-death experience, for they had met the Reaper directly, its purpose was unknown. The greatest minds of history, Persephone the Wise, Artorius the Grand Sage Elder, even Orkan the Undying, were unsure of what it meant. It was the first time in recorded history that death had manifested itself when no one had died, let alone marked anyone with its own personal sigil. Vakrias was believed to have a great destiny for this reason, and was put to task far harder and far earlier than any previous heir before him. While its primary reason was unknown, different advantages brought along with death's sigil began to show up. The vast majority of spellweavers are able to only master one, or at best two forms of magic. It is primarily due to the level of concentration needed to maintain the active effects of spellcraft that most are so limited. In rare exceptions, a practitioner may manage to add a third form of magic to their arsenal. Most who diversify their repertoire will do so with spell components cultivated with the aid of masters of other crafts. However, it is the exceptionally rare mage who can do so on their own. This became evident when Vakrias was first beginning his magic lessons. A requirement to move to this level of study was that a hopeful must have passed through at minimum 20 years in the academy. Now, I will go into more detail later about the specific location. However, note that when I specifically say just the academy, I am always referring to the location nestled within Riam, a kingdom that I will be going over very soon as well. Once this task is completed, in which period one was expected to have chosen their weapon of choice and begun the painstaking task of mastering it as well, to use as a focal point and catalyst in most cases. Due to the very nature of how each Draco's personal weapon was forged, channeling one's magic through it was made far easier through the use of vastly augmented gemstones. Set into the hilt of the weapon, they are designed to store energy and special minerals known as petramentis, or loosely translated in English to mental stone, specially cured to ease the mind of the one using it to sharpen focus. Typically, what will happen is when someone begins using magic, is that the petramentis will begin to stain the weapon the hue of the wielder's aura. Typically, this can change and will usually be an indicator of a person's nature. In Vakrias' case, though, this did not occur as normal. Most will see their weapon turn a blue or red, a yellow or green, or more uncommon, perhaps a brown, or even a copper. In very rare cases, a black or a white may even show up. In Vakrias' case, none of these occurred, whether it was because of the Reaper's influence, or because there was just no other way to really translate from the wild language of magic into a tangible, visible form. The blade he carried had turned a deep plum, bordering on black. Most surprising of all, though, was that unlike his father or grandfather, or even great-grandfather, Vakrias did not choose a sword, but he chose to wield a scythe. The scythe he wielded, however, quite closely resembled a deformed pickaxe, though much larger in scale, and he would go on to be the first one to master dual-wielding the scythe. Having Persephone examine his weapon, along with the mastersmiths who forged it at the urgent behest of his father Vlad, Vakrias stood in shock when it was explained that the only logical reasoning was that since an aura staining the blade was often a good indicator to a mage's potential, among other things, was that his potential was nearly limitless. Being this was the case, Vlad had requested that the greatest runesmith known was to be commissioned to upgrade Valkyrie's scythe. When it was returned to him after several months, in which time Vakrias had been wholly devoted to his studies, he stood in awe of the work, as were all who looked upon the scythe. One would not think at first glance it was the weapon of a just and righteous king. However, it was revealed that the spectre of death had once more appeared, guiding the smith on what runes to use in which combination, along with slight modifications to the weapon itself. It was undeniable that the weapon was now a truly brutal instrument of war, a symbol of power that would not be halted if the need to draw it arose. The weapon seemed to now possess a saw-like crest curving over the spines of the blades, and the weapon's handle itself, which had not been changed, was mostly circular. However, it was not smooth. The smiths that forged the weapon cut the curved handle to have 20 perfectly symmetrical faces, a fact that they pointed out was no easy feat to cover the curves. Upon returning to him, however, the weapon can only be described as releasing a burst of joy from its master's hand, as a royal purple aura flared around the weapon, which would continue to return any time he would channel his power through Liberator, as he would come to name the scythe. He chose this name, he later explained, because he planned to use it to free those who could not free themselves. It quickly became evident when Vakrias was able to not only master the basics of the primary forces of nature, earth, air, fire, and water, and that even using all simultaneously barely proved a challenge for his mental state. He was instructed to control each to do drastically different things, holding water in the shape of a complex symbol, spelling with fire, spinning air in alternating circles around him, sometimes 4 or 5 layers deep, and to do all of this, while lifting a small hill of earth to float in the air. He was quickly labeled as a savant and moved to more advanced teachings, and given the earned credit to pursue other forms of magic as well at will. Now, while I could easily go on for quite some time about the magical prowess Vakrias possessed, that would be boring and have this telling at several hours in length. At the height of his power, however, Vakrias was labeled as the first Master Chaos Mage, of which there would be others, able to manipulate earth, air, fire, water, light, darkness, lightning, blood, healing, and even time magic, which in and of itself was under strict teaching and restrictions from Manel Makar himself. And believe when the utter King of Gods instructs you and tells you to behave, there are few daring to disobey. As his time in the academy drew closer to ending, Vakrias would surprise everyone by being among the first to play the sport of raid that his father had invented, with Vlad, Catherine, and all the other Dracos cheering from the stands in the royal box, as he led the Riami Raiders to victory after victory, though they did come up short, ending the first ever championship game in a deadlock, or draw, if you prefer. The sport, however, was wildly accepted and became a staple of the plain, developing into a hallmark of the region. It would come to be that the championships would be held every 50 years, so that no player could reasonably compete in more than 2 in the interest of fairness. In the rare case, one could participate in up to 3, depending on when their tenure in the academy began. In Vakrias' case, however, he only ever participated in one championship game, but he was often viewed as one of the best to ever play, not because of flashy movements or overpowering his opponents, but because he had been an instrumental forerunner in inventing team maneuvers that, to this day, no team can even hope to reach the championship match without knowing how to execute or defend from those tactics. It was upon the day that his Purple Dragon Dominator hatched that Valkyries had finally decided to issue his challenge to Vlad for the right to the Battle of Succession. Vlad, who had believed the day was fast approaching, was all too happy to accept. Set to be on the day of the Chimera, February 29th, if anyone is curious to that. The battle was surprisingly not a long one. While more powerful by far, Vlad seemed to be lacking the creativity his son was all but consumed by. His ingenuity and unorthodox fighting style, combined with his mastery of the scythe, could be fended off for a short time only, and thus it was inevitable that Valkyries would claim victory. After coming to this realization, Vlad stopped Vakrias' next charge, holding his hand out, palm up, fingers down in the symbol of yielding. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause at the amazing battle. It was documented in great detail for those who were unable to follow the time in the battle. Vakrias and Vlad were among two of the fastest fighters to ever enter that arena after all. The applause and cheers were so loud, in fact, it was almost missed that a massive stone had fallen from the heavens and landed just on the outskirts of the arena. The smoldering crater held a massive, upright stone etched with holy fire. The message it bore was both complex and simple at the same time. Everything about the stone seemed to lend a contradiction to another part of itself, but the message was as follows. On the chiming of the 18th hour of the day of the Chimera, the Drow, the Angel, the Saurian, the Pixie, and the Twins will surround a beam of chaos with a circle of steel, radiating all colors, and yet none. Speaking the six forces, they will summon forth the eternal paladin of paradise, and upon speaking his name, the champion will draw forth eternity and rid the land of evil. Alright, my little relics, I will go ahead and leave you to contemplate exactly what that prophecy might be. I know some of you know what it is. I have told you in depth the meaning behind it, although the one person listening right now most likely does not remember herself what it means. That will be all for tonight, however. We will be visiting back more on the story. We will be visiting more about how the seat of power was transferred to Riam shortly, as it was done at Vakrias' behest. And soon we'll be going into Vakrias' son, which I have broken a bit of habit with not revealing his wife or child's name yet, but that'll be for next time. Until then, remember, you never know what is watching you from the darkness. Sweet dreams.